This episode of the Oh No 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 podcast is sponsored by Dynamic Industrial Services, the rope access specialists. As long-time Wraith Rovers supporters, we're very familiar with ropey performances. But if you need a service that's more Sam Stanton than Willie Akio, look no further than DIS. Operating across Scotland, they specialise in working at height, offering maintenance, inspection, repairs and more. So if you've got any problems at a height that even John Fredrickson can't reach, visit dynamicindustrialservices.co.uk to find out more. Well, it had to happen sometime. This is the 29th episode of the Oh No 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 podcast, and we are finally going to have to talk about a loss. The Rovers travelled to Airdrie yesterday, unbeaten in the 16 matches since the last time we'd been to the Excelsior Stadium. And what we saw was a remarkably similar game to that last visit, with Airdrie running out 1-0 winners in a game of very few chances where they really kind of dictated the course of the game. So my name is Duncan Cameron, and joining me today for a much more downbeat pod than usual. First of all, I have Carol Allison-Smith. How are you, Carol?
Somber this morning. It's a somber morning.
Is that we're all in very different tone for this one, I think. Scott Fleming is here too. How are you, Scott?
I am not too bad. I mean, we could have been worse. Dundee United at least got beat as well.
Absolutely true. And joining us with a real treat for the YouTube watchers with his Japanese goalie top, it's Leslie Mabon. How are you, Les?
All right. I've been better, but I've also been worse.
That I think is probably a good summation of yesterday. I think with 3 minutes to go, when United were still drawing at Tannadice, and it was pretty downbeat, and we managed to end up fairly positive actually. In the end, all things considered. So we'll jump straight into this one and start to kind of pick it apart. And I think the best place to start is immediately before the game, when we got a little bit of team news through with a bit of a surprise. So I think it was just 2 changes from the team at East End Park. One of them, Scott, was the one that you were looking for. So Callum Smith kind of came in up front in place of Jack Hamilton. But the one that nobody was looking for was in goal, where Kevin Dabrowski came out, presumably as a direct result of the very clear issues he had on Tuesday, and was replaced, interestingly, by Andy McNeil rather than Robbie Thompson. So, Scott, give me your thoughts on that whole situation and the team lineup.
Yeah, it was especially the goalie shout was definitely surprising. I mean, we were driving through in the car when the team lineup got announced, and so the guys were asking, "All right, what's the team?" And I says, "Oh, Andy McNeil's in goals," and they went, "You sure?" Because I think everybody just assumed it would be Robbie Thompson if Kev wasn't fit enough, and obviously Kev wasn't on the bench either, so he absolutely wasn't fit enough. But it almost makes Tuesday even funnier that the players couldn't win when he was broken and clearly broken. So hopefully he's back next weekend, but well, I don't know if he will. But I thought Andy McNeil actually had a solid game anyway. We'll obviously speak about the game itself, but I was a wee bit less sort of worried because he's been out playing games. So he's clearly not nervous in terms of, oh, I'm actually on the pitch in a game situation. So that sort of sense, it was not too bad. And then, as you say, I did want Callum Smith to start, although how the game panned out, I felt like we played to as if we still had Hamilton up front. So I don't think we played the way that I would like us to play if we do play without Jack Hamilton, sort of thing. But no, that's all really from the team lineup anyway. That I kind of I wasn't surprised that it was only really one or two changes because even though there was only the 4 days between the games, I just thought he would keep the continuity after we'd won.
Yeah, I don't think there was anyone expecting kind of big, wholesale changes. But it's interesting what you say there about the playing without Jack Hamilton, but as if he's there. Because I remember the last time, one of us said exactly that was the away game at Arbroath, and I thought it was actually a very similar setup. So that one, I remember saying again, it was me and Blair. I had the conversation on the pod about it. It's like, is that a 4-4-2 or not? And it's one of these things where I think really, if you want to get your inverting the pyramid out, you can decide however you want to plot it, however you like. But in simple terms, I think yesterday more or less was a 4-4-2. Really, Vaughan and Smith really playing as a front two, and you've got four midfielders and you've got four defenders. And yeah, I think like the Arbroath game, it didn't really work. And I think the thing is, it was Gullen and Smith and Arbroath, as I say, and Vaughan and Smith. Very little interchange between those two at any point. It's almost like you're playing two separate 4-4-1s. Like we've got one striker at any one time. They're not really linking up. Carol, give me your thoughts on that. Kind of the choice to not have Jack Hamilton in the starting lineup, and indeed any thoughts on the goalkeeper situation as well.
I'll follow on what you've both said. I think it's it's like the playbook. We're playing like Hamilton's on there, and everyone's following that plan for it, and he's just not there. And yesterday, I think it was very obvious, and I put it on Twitter that there is a Sam Stanton size gap that we are not filling, and I don't think it's an excuse. I think it's we need to change the way we play. Or yesterday we looked physically tired, but also a little bit mentally tired, as people just couldn't think, okay, this is not working. What do I need to do on the field to make this work? And it was just a bit flat yesterday, I think, mentally and physically, just looked a bit flat. Not tired, flat.
I actually think tactically it was quite flat as well. And in like a literal sense, as I say, it's like you've got your four defenders, your four midfielders, and your two forwards. There's not a lot going on sort of between the lines. Yeah, again, to get into the kind of daft tactics talk. But it's very reminiscent of the last game at Airdrie, which is very, very similar. And I think Airdrie are due a huge amount of credit, an inordinate amount of credit for that, because what they've done, really that nobody else has done to the Rovers this season, including Hibs in the League Cup, albeit they still won the game, but they made the Rovers look poor and look limited. And I think the interesting thing about the way that Airdrie do it is that they're just really, really organised and really disciplined. And I think sometimes people say that about football teams as a way to be a little bit snide. It's like a way of accusing a team of being negative. But I don't think it's the case with Airdrie at all. Genuinely, they're really disciplined and really organised. And what they'll do, and what they've done to the Rovers twice now, is they'll let you have the ball and they'll just close off all your angles and close off all your passes. And it means that it happened in the last game and it happened in this one as well. Scott Brown and Sean Byrne get a fair bit of the ball, but all of their passes are closed off. So then what you need is for someone to carry the ball through, and that's what neither of them are particularly suited to do. It's exactly what Sam Stanton is suited to do. And without that, what you then end up looking at is, well, who else is going to be able to sort of run through this Airdrie side? Josh Mullen on one side, I am not by any means at all claiming any kind of foresight in this, but I'd said I would have started Connolly. I think that probably would have been a better idea. In hindsight, just Connolly's more likely to run beyond his man than Josh Mullen is. Josh Mullen just naturally tends to deliver the ball from where he gets it, like Ross Millen does, quite slow on that side. And then on the other side, Dylan Easton, who is very good at beating his man, came up against Megwa at right back, who I thought was the best player on the park. It was brilliant. Apparently, he goes to Dubai with Hibs tomorrow, so we were very unfortunate to that he was available for this one. But I thought he was excellent. Really, kind of shut down Dylan Easton, and that then gives you sort of the pattern of the game. Really, so the Rovers really just struggled to get much of a kind of foothold on the game, and Airdrie, like they did last time, took a chance that that they worked hard to get. And I thought actually, again, this time, I thought they were actually better at getting out than they were compared to the last one. Todorov and is it McGill, the other forward? Again, not in a dismissive way at all, like two big units who work well and do what they do, and gave Dan O'Reilly and Ewan Murray a really tough time. So we'll go through the game and we'll pick it apart in kind of more detail. But in terms of the general sort of the pattern and the layout, that was how I saw it. Leslie, what about you? Kind of going into the game and how it sort of developed on a fairly high level.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with anything that any of you have said. I mean, just a couple of observations to add. I think the Sam Stanton shaped hole was readily apparent. If I'd been asked to pick a lineup, if he'd been fit, I would have started Ross Matthews, even if it meant an attacker had to come out. Mainly because I think against Airdrie, we need to do something different. So regular listeners to the pod will know that I love my 1990s video game references. And the first Tomb Raider in 1996, there's a bit where you've to beat this character called Atlantean Lara, and it's like an alien version of Lara Croft that does exactly the same things that you do. So if you shoot it, it shoots back, but does it better. And you have to really figure out how to beat this. And that's what I think Airdrie are like for us. And there's an obvious and logical reason for that the two teams have got very similar DNA. There's a fair kind of flow of players. And Rhys McCabe, actually, I think, has improved and added a new dimension to what Ian Murray had. So they've got that Ian Murray know-how in DNA, but they've got that wee bit extra as well. I mean, that's not to say that I necessarily think Rhys McCabe is a better manager than Ian Murray, but with that Airdrie team, he's added something else. And that makes it, I think, very hard for us to go out and beat them by playing Murray ball. So I would have, if Matthews had been available and fit, I would have started him. Just another thing to say about the whole as well, and about who has to come back and drop back. The thing that worries me about that as well is if Lewis Vaughan is coming back, he's probably got the technical skills to do it. But we chatted about this before, that he's having to think. But also, you're taking your top scorer further away from the goals. If Vaughan's having to come back, you're taking the top scorer out of the box and further away from the goals, which just intuitively feels wrong. So I think just to add to what you've said, I think there was definitely a Stanton-shaped hole, whether Matthews wasn't fit enough. And also as well, I'm just going to pick up on something that Ian Lato had put on Twitter, which I wholeheartedly agree with, which is that if Jack Hamilton is fit, I think he has to start. And I think we saw again, like you said, up at Arbroath, we were playing as if Hamilton was on the pitch when he wasn't. And one of the kind of workarounds for that then, okay, if he's fit, he starts. If not, do we look at bringing somebody else in who's kind of like him? But we can come to that in due course. So yeah, going into it, maybe not the formation I would have gone with, but you can see why the manager went with it.
The only thing I'll say to Ian's point that you've made there about Jack Hamilton starting, because I do agree with it. I just think you need to temper that slightly by saying that Jack Hamilton, I think, at the full 90 minutes in the last game at Airdrie. So it's by no means a case of saying that they would sort of struggle to deal with him or anything like that. They dealt with him very effectively last time. But as I say, I do agree with the point that it gives you a different dimension. And again, we've talked about it enough times before. What I like about having Hamilton in the team is that there's no question about who should be closest to the goal at any given time. Smith and Vaughan at different times, as you say, one of them's dropping deep, one of them's going wide, and then there's nobody in the middle at that point, and that's where that kind of focal point of Jack Hamilton really does help. But let's kind of get into the game itself then, and start kind of running through the order of things kind of as they develop. So I actually thought that the Rovers didn't start too badly at all. The sort of opening period of the game, I think, was about as good as it got for the Rovers, really. I think in terms of creating a little bit of space and creating a little bit of chances, there was nothing too concrete. But in that kind of opening period, Scott, did you think we were going to kind of get a repeat of the last one, or do you think we maybe did have a bit of a looked like we had a bit of an edge at that stage?
I mean, it was quite apparent early on that we were playing two up front with Vaughan and Smith, and the two of them were. You could see they were kind of swapping sides and trying to see, right, who am I going to get sort of any change out of the day. But I mean, I thought the Airdrie centre backs were pretty solid all game. They were winning any headers that was coming. I must say it was actually in terms. I think I said it in the group chat at half time. Vaughan was like a trampoline yesterday with his touch in the first half. Anything that came to him, it was pinging off for 5 yards. I don't know if it was just that he was seeing the ball late or what, but it just seemed to be pinging off him, which was unlike him because he's usually pretty good at bringing it down and getting other players into play with him. But and I just thought whatever we did try, Airdrie did sort of nullify us, but I almost thought it was the exact same formation for both teams, and it was just each other cancelling it out. That's what it felt like, and I think it was Alan Preston that was covering it for the radio, and he kind of said the same. It was like I was actually surprised there was a goal in the game because the two of them were just cancelling each other out most of the game. So in terms of the start, I thought we were too negative in terms of any time we did go down a side, we were going, oh, I can't get down this side and just going back instead of trying to. And again, I think this is where Slam Stanton's been actually very good for us, is where we've got that third option coming from the middle, being out of his shape almost, to come and give that extra option where then we've got a 3-on-2 and it's back to these sort of triangles again. But I mean, I just thought in the first half in general, I just thought we were a bit slow and a bit sluggish. It just we never got going, and the one time we did get going was when Easton actually got a chance. The keeper made a comfortable enough save, but it came from us playing that quick 1-2 passing. We cut them open, and then Easton was able to cut in and get his shot away. But other than that, I just thought the first half. I know they went and scored, but I just thought 0-0. It probably would be a fair result at half time.
That I think is absolutely fair. And again, I'm talking more about the last game at Airdrie than I am this one, but that was how I felt about that one. Like they won that game 1-0. They really had one big chance in that game, and they took it. This one's similar. I think though, when you say that the two teams they kind of cancelled each other out, you're spot on. The difference I felt in the sort of pattern of the game was how well they were getting out compared to the way that we were. So we were trying to pass our way up the park, and as you say, trying to find the triangles and kind of struggling to do so. They were, and again, I'm not criticising this in the slightest, they were able to just knock it long, and then Todorov's flicking it on for McGill, or McGill's knocking it back into the midfield for Frizzell. And it meant that where it was taking us 30 or 40 seconds to crash against them and not really getting anywhere, it was taking them 5 seconds to cause us a bit of bother. And that's where Andy McNeil makes really the one proper save in the whole game relatively early on. And it's that kind of quick turnover, and then they've suddenly got us going the wrong direction. And it's a decent effort by Todorov that McNeil does really, really well to kind of tip over the bar. And I mean, to be fair, I think it's probably about the last time that we'll really mention him. So we'll just talk about Andy McNeil briefly, just to say, I thought, yeah, did everything asked of him. I don't think there was any question of fault for his at the goal. Really, the one thing is to make that save, which he does excellently. Couple of crosses, collect a couple of slightly tamer efforts. So I think he justified any selection that there might have been around, whether it was him or Robbie Thompson. I think it's one of these things where selfishly it's worked quite well for us that Edinburgh City have been struggling so much, He's had a lot of practice in the last few weeks, and I think the general consensus has been that. I think they conceded 5 last week, and that Andy McNeil still played quite well. Like he's not been chucking them in. So I think he justified that selection. And then Carol, why don't you just kind of take us into the goal then? That really, well, going quite literally the kind of the defining incident of the game.
Yeah, the Race TV were covering the away game, and this season when they've been covering away games, they're quite open with the fact that the picture might drop in and out. So the stream was a little bit, speaking Spanish there, it's a little bit weak, and so didn't really get a lot of the goal, but got the commentary, and it just felt like that was the only highlight of the first half, and it was just really, they closed us down, they stopped us moving. Any triangle form we wanted to make, they were there on every point. And then Todorov pops up, scores a goal, and that's pretty much it.
That's it. He takes it well, but it's one of these where you think in a game, is he like the last one? Only takes one chance. Leslie, how did you feel about the goal and the way it developed?
I don't think you can really single anybody out for criticism. You certainly can't single Andy McNeil out for criticism. He didn't do anything wrong at the goal. In the build-up, in the moments leading up to it, Scott was talking about everything pinging off Vaughan and going flying. I would say the same was true for Josh Mullen. And, the balls were going kind of flying and there was missed kicks and things like that. And in the build up to that, the Millen and Mullen both had their moments where things didn't go where they wanted to. But, for the goal itself, I don't think you can actually blame anybody. It wasn't a howler, there was nobody horrendous out of position. Airdrie just got a chance and they put that chance away. And as we know, that's what they are extremely good at doing. So it's one of those goals you kind of thought, well, it's gone in and it is what it is. It's nobody's fault in it. The pressure, the onus is now on us to respond, which we tried to do but didn't really.
I think the only thing, sorry, just to quickly jump in, the only thing that I suppose it's a little bit of criticism is that, again, we were allowing too many balls into the box, I thought, yesterday. So the only thing you could say is, I know it was sort of one that a ball came from the right-hand side, our left, over, and it missed everybody. Then it went back out the other side, and then it came back into Todorov. But there was quite a few times in that first half, and I thought it actually reminded me a little bit of Tannadice when we were allowing far too many crosses in the first half, but we then addressed it in the second half. So I don't know if it's just a thing where it seems to happen after 5-10 minutes and players need to get in at half time and be told that, right, we need to sit and actually stop the crosses coming into the box, because I thought it was far too many times that we were allowing either Megwa or I think it was Charlie Telford. It was sometimes coming out to that right, and then the same for I can't remember who it was to the left, but it was
Hancock's the left back.
Hancock, yeah, and so we were allowing too many balls into the box again. So I think that was my only sort of worry, was that we've got Todorov, who's 6'4" or whatever he is, in the box there, and he's going to get his head on something at one point. So I mean, he's done it quite a few times against us. So I think it's also something that we were almost waiting on to happen at one point.
Yeah, you're right. There are some teams, I think, where Ewan Murray and Dan O'Reilly are the kind of guys you're quite happy to accept crosses. I think, it wasn't those two, but if you go back to the first derby at East End Park, Dunfermline must have delivered 12, 15 crosses into our box, and we were quite happy with it. Airdrie's not the team to do that against. Not with Todorov. He's too strong, and then we saw that all afternoon. To your point, Leslie, about nobody directly at fault. Again, I agree with you. I think it's one of these, in hindsight, you can look at and you could go, oh, if you did a bit different, or if you did a bit different, you could prevent that. I think the one that, if anyone's pointing fingers, it might be at Ross Millen, but actually it's not on the highlights, but saw it live. There was a cross into the box kind of 2 minutes before that comes into the same area, and he basically managed to chest it down straight to Andy McNeil. And I think he's trying to do exactly the same thing, but the angle's not quite there. And then, as he hooks it away, Josh Mullen's kind of backpedaling, trying to get his head on it. It's so tricky to do. And yeah, I think try kind of stopping the first cross from the other side is probably the early intervention. But very much a case of Airdrie being clinical, taking that one big chance that they had. The rest of the first half, I thought kind of passed without really kind of too much incident. Really, the Rovers kind of huffed and puffed a little bit. We did get the slightly odd kind of back-to-back incidents of Nikolai Todorov's booking and then Josh Mullen's booking. So I wanted to see this. I had a look on the highlights on this. It looks like it's a very, very clear foul when Mullen's kind of shepherding the ball out for a corner, I think he is, or he's going to keep it in, prevent it going out for a goal kick, and Todorov just kind of steams through the back of him. It was a very clear free kick. Doesn't give it. Mullen's then very unhappy and has a go at Todorov, who, watching the highlights, to me, doesn't seem with a huge amount back. There's a little bit of verbals, and it's one of these ones where I think 99 referees out of 100 either let them both go or book them both. There doesn't seem to be anyone who's doing anything particularly badly over the other. But for whatever reason, he decides he's going to give Josh Mullen a reprieve. Not a free kick, but doesn't book him. Does book Todorov, who looks very confused. The game then continues for a minute or so, and the Rovers get a corner kick. Josh Mullen is trying to take the corner. He's had to go and get the ball because there's not a ball boy handy, which is fine. And then he gets booked at that point. I don't know if, Scott, if you were in the ground as well as me, did you have any idea what was happening at any point in that period?
I was the exact same as you in terms of, right, they're either both going to get booked here or they're both not. But when he showed Todorov the yellow, I thought, have I missed him showing it to Mullen? But because Mullen by that point was already away to go and get the ball. Also at this point, we're 1-0 down. So I don't know anybody that's wasting time when you're losing. So unless you're at Celtic Park and only happy to lose 1-0, like that's the only time I'm going to ever think that could be happening. Like it's just how the referee thought. I think in his head, he went, I really actually should have booked the two of them. And he's went, I'm going to have to think of someone now. And it's the old, I've given a corner. It might not have been a corner, so I'm just going to blow straight away for a free kick here, just so that I don't look bad. So that's what I felt like. But at the same time, he kind of booked him after he'd put the ball down. I thought, has he been arguing with the linesman about it being in the quadrant or something? And then said something to the linesman, but then I thought, nah, it's been too quick for that to happen. So, and I didn't think he was actually taking that long to go and get the ball. So that's why I was just very surprised. And then everybody from that point, I think that's when everybody actually started getting on at the referee, because from that moment, he'd had an all right game up until that time, but then from that moment, he almost didn't care that folk were wasting time. And you're like, well, you just booked somebody that's losing. And then from that point on, the Airdrie keeper was taking as much time as he wanted. And I mean, we'll talk about it later again, but how there was only 4 minutes added on to that game, I'll never know. Because there had to be minimum kind of like East End Park sort of time, like 7 at least. Because I know there was only the one goal in the first half and whatever, but the amount of time wasted that was going on, it got to the point the security guards at the side were actually running for the ball and giving it back to the players. That's how long it was taking.
I wondered if Mullen, if he wasn't kind of chirping away at the linesman about the previous foul. But again, it seemed it was in the process of putting the ball down. It wasn't like he was up in the linesman's face or anything. And it's interesting you say there about it's almost that kind of totting up of offences where you see it sometimes where it's like, you've had 4 small fouls, so you're getting booked from the next one. It was almost like Josh Mullen had earned himself 99% of a yellow card in that first incident. So then the slightest little complaint to the linesman, and it's like, well, that's you tipped over. But just so, I didn't understand it at all. And it's one of these things where you see it with the referees, and it's like they're making their own lives more difficult. But we saw it in that Ayr United game where the referee starts making weird decisions, and the next thing you know, Ayr United have had a man sent off. You think if you just book a guy 5 minutes before, which is what everyone expects, everyone on both sides expects you to do, it'll be fine. And I thought this was similar. Up till that point, as you say, it had been a pretty easy game to referee. He hadn't really been asked to do much. And I think if he just leaves Todorov and Mullen alone, or books them both at that point, probably still just carries on fine. But he kind of made a rod for his own back. And listen, it doesn't excuse anything at all. But like Mullen gets booked for dissent, Easton gets booked for dissent for a free kick that we were given. You know, it wasn't like we didn't get the foul. Someone, I'm not sure who it was, clatters Liam Dick, and it's a bad challenge, and Easton's unhappy about it. And it's one of these that I think, again, you don't see the yellow card come out for a lot of the time, because the referee sort of recognises, like, well, you're unhappy because your pal's just been smashed to bits. But that doesn't excuse, you know, bookings for dissent, very, very silly, and we'll obviously have a further incident along those lines to talk about for our old pal Ross as well. But I'd say that was the only kind of other kind of incident of note, really, I think, in the first half, and unless there's anything that I've missed. Going into the second half, then, I did think that Airdrie, don't know if it's necessarily fair to say they retreated slightly, but they were notably sort of less adventurous after half time. But I think kind of justifiably so. You know, if you've got a strategy and it's working, stick to it. And that, again, they just played the way they wanted to play, sat in and said, right, come and pass through us. And the Rovers really struggled to do so. Because, again, of all the players we've got, Sam Stanton's the most likely to be able to, you know, cut a pass through a defence as well. So we'll probably then just kind of fast forward right up to the point where Ian Murray made a relatively uncharacteristic kind of triple substitution, which what was that?
Quadruple, no?
A quadruple, sorry.
Quadruple.
You're absolutely right. Quadruple substitution.
Triple.
Yeah, just around about the hour mark, I think that was it.
Yeah.
One of them kind of partially, at least, enforced Ewan Murray seemed to pick up an injury. But Les, I'll come to you on this, but just to kind of recap those substitutions. So really it was a case of Ross Matthews came on for Ewan Murray, but it meant Scott Brown kind of dropped back. So you've got Ross Matthews going into the defence. You've then got Jack Hamilton coming on for Lewis Vaughan, essentially, going up front. And you've got Jamie Gullen and Aidan Connolly coming on for Dylan Easton and Josh Mullen. So kind of refreshing your attacking options to get more legs in there. Now, at that point, Leslie, were you happy with those substitutions? Is that something you think you were looking out for?
I would say yes and no. I think we absolutely needed to make the changes. And I think at that point of the game, having Connolly, Matthews and Hamilton, I would have brought on. I think there's all very good logical reasons for that happening. Mullen wasn't getting a lot of joy down the right. Connolly brings a bit of energy, aggression, something different. So I would absolutely have wanted to see Connolly on. Hamilton, as we talked about at the start, you know, he brings on the physical presence, you know, and he's an absolute handful for players that are maybe getting a bit mentally tired. And Matthews, I think, it gave us the opportunity to have somebody who could do something kind of like Stanton. Gullen, I think bringing Gullen on for Easton was one sub too many. I think it was one change too many. I think the three would have been fine. I would have kept Hammer kind of warming up, and I would have given Easton maybe another 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, I think, like we said, Megwa had an absolute blinder. And I'm just going to say, as an aside, I think if you fast forward 12 months, Megwa's starting every week for Hibs, and you can put that on record. But nonetheless, I would have given Easton just another 10 minutes, given his quality, given what we know he can do, with Matthews in there, with Hamilton in there as well, just to see if anything had stuck, and if not, then put Gullen on. But yeah, by and large, I think, you know, we needed to make the changes. Ewan Murray coming off gave a kind of natural point for that to happen. But at the time, I thought 4 at once was too many, and in hindsight, I think that would definitely be the case.
And Carol, how did you feel at that point? How did you think the rest of the game might develop from that stage?
I feel the same as Liz. It was one substitution too many, and I thought, oh, this is not going to. We're not going to do anything with it. If it was 3 and leaving Easton on, or maybe leaving Vaughan on, and just for another 10 minutes, we could have done something with it. But it just there, I thought we've done one too many, and it's not going to go anywhere. And it didn't. I think mentally tired is what everybody was yesterday. Physically, Airdrie were closing us down, and it worked out that we're fit. But mentally, we just weren't sharp enough yesterday. And even with 4 changes, we didn't adapt quickly to it. We didn't. It was just 4 other players that came on. It didn't slip into the team or anything. It just felt like 4 other players that came on.
Yeah, I felt like, well, first of all, I have to say that at the moment, in the moment, sorry, I was pretty pleased with those substitutions. I thought the players going on gave us more of the dimension of what I felt we needed than the players going off. So even Gullen over Easton, you're getting more sort of hard running out of Jamie Gullen. And I sort of felt like we'd, kind of crashed up against Airdrie's solid defence enough with our kind of our ball players almost. And it's maybe a case of, well, hang on, let's go and try and run at them instead. So Connolly on one side, Gullen on the other. The way it developed, I thought the first kind of 5 minutes or so after the substitutions, there was a little bit of both teams just settling into a new dynamic almost. But I didn't think that lasted very long. It felt to me like after that 5 minutes, Airdrie sort of came to the same conclusion. Like, actually, you know what, we can just keep doing what we've been doing, and then really, threw the gauntlet down to the Rovers to say, right, well, come on then, can you do something different? Scott, did you think the Rovers really did manage to sort of change the dynamic of that game at all?
Well, I suppose you would say no, because nothing really happened after it. But I absolutely was. You needed at least 3, if not 4, to change that game because there was nothing happening. And I think that actually made more of a. I thought that sub was more of a statement for Ian Murray of this is how much I need this to change because we've not got that one player today that's not going to get us out of it. We need to completely change as a whole. So, I mean, I think it was going to be a triple sub because Ross Matthews was called up late when they were all ready to go on because of Ewan Murray going down. And I mean, straight away, once he went down, he'd taken his shin guards off, and you knew straight away, right, his afternoon's done. So, no, I was kind of glad when they all came on, and I actually was not surprised to see it was both Easton and Mullen because, as I said earlier, the two of them just it was kind of not like them. They were both looking at their fullback when they got the ball, went nah, and just back each time, and it happened far too many times yesterday. Whether that's because the two fullbacks were closing them down, I just thought that go and take a chance just once, see if you get past them. And I'm never gonna criticize somebody for trying something to, especially in a game like yesterday. It's different when you've been working passing routes through teams. If you're actually just trying to create something out of nothing because nothing's worked before, just do it. You never know, it might actually come off for you at that point. But I just thought that Meko and Hancock were a bit too comfortable at times yesterday, and absolutely something needed to change. And it was quite apparent yesterday as well that 20 minutes in, I almost was going, Duncan was right, we should have started Connolly. It just, because Connolly gives you that, right, I'm going to run with the ball at you. And he's also dangerous because he can cut in on his left. So I just felt once the subs were made, I thought there was going to be a change. And again, I agree with you guys saying that it did for maybe 5 minutes. And then I thought that actually Connolly and Gullen were actually then too narrow, and we almost had no wingers at all on the pitch. And Millen, anytime he got the ball, he's almost got his hands out going, what do you want me to do here? he's like, I'm not going to just lump it up. It's not like 90 minutes and we need to get the ball up the park. It's like we've still got 20 minutes to play here. So it was a bit baffling at times, but I just think in the end, it just looked like we ran a wee bit out of ideas, and it was two teams that just kind of nullifying each other. But it also, I think you touched on it earlier, Duncan, that Airdrie just seemed to have somebody always free, and that kind of didn't make any sense to me. Going, how have they got somebody free? They've got it's 11v11. They can't. I don't know if somebody's not got their man or the way that they're almost pressing us. There's some reason that we didn't have somebody going with him, but it just always seemed to be the second ball. There was always somebody on it for Airdrie, but it just wasn't happening for us yesterday for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of this sounding like I'm hosting an Airdrie podcast, Rhys McCabe, setting aside how well he did from a management point of view yesterday, I also thought as a player did really, really well in terms of what he was doing. To your point there, Scott, about like Easton and Mullen, where it's like, take a chance, try and go by your man, try and go by your fullback. A lot of the time, so he's playing in the midfield, but when the ball goes to one side, he sort of drops in. So it's like Easton, normally you think, right, if you can beat your fullback, you've maybe then got a run at the centre half. But it's McCabe drops in as well. So it's like, if you do have Connolly on, for example, he's got the fullback on one side. When he cuts inside, he's hitting McCabe before he gets to the defence again. But that, you would think then, would mean that they'd be sort of bottom heavy. You think, well, if McCabe's almost dropping into the defence, they'll be light on numbers further up the park. But that didn't prove to be the case at all. It's something I was thinking yesterday during the game. We looked like we were playing with 10 men at times. And just that, yeah, in the midfield, so they're knocking it up. Todorov knocks it back just sort of into the middle of the park. And again, it's Frizzell who's picking that up. And you think, we should be winning more of these just by sheer law of averages. The ball should fall closer to a Rovers player more often than it has. But again, that's credit to Airdrie for that. And I think the thing for me, again, to what you're saying about the kind of narrowness of Gullen and Connolly in that later stage, the longer it went on, we really, and we know this is a feature of Ian Murray when he's chasing a game, the structure kind of disappeared, really. And it sort of became, at first it was like a 4-2-4. So the back four was still in place. You've then got kind of Matthews and Byrne are in the middle. But then there's a big, big gap. And you've got Gullen, Smith, excuse me, Connolly and Hamilton all kind of occupying the same area, but all completely marked out of the game. And then when Scott McGill came on, it felt like, up till this point, Scott McGill has been asked to kind of play everywhere, but at least in separate occasions. Whereas yesterday it was like, right, Scott, if you could just go and play everywhere all at once, that would be nice. He just kind of came on. It was like, right, just fill gaps almost. And again, we've seen it happen and we've seen it work where you just go to a formation that's completely unrecognizable. And James McPake really, really struggled with that when we did that from the start at East End Park. But yeah, it didn't work yesterday. You could see, again, too often, the ball goes out to Ross Millen, for example, and he's looking and his options are all marked up. And then in the last 10 minutes, I thought Airdrie had more chances than we did because we just couldn't get out. And again, it meant that all they needed to do was just knock it into our half. And they were 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. Carol, I mean, was there any point where you felt in the last kind of 20 minutes or so that we might actually scramble something out of that game?
No. Direct answer, no. That was the first game I thought we're not going to get to score because we're not even close to the goal. Just physically, it would have to be some sort of wonder kick from the McNeil's goal because Airdrie were like, if you're not in our half, you can't score. We're going back to basics here, the last 10 minutes. If Wraith aren't in our half, they can't score, and we made no attempt to get up. It was like you say with Scott McGill, he came on and it was like it was a leaky bucket, and he's run out of digits, so to put fingers in the holes, and the water's still flowing, and he's just hugging this leaky bucket with more holes. Yesterday was the first game where I thought we're not even going to get close to getting a last minute equaliser. Never mind a glory winner. It was just flat and out of ideas, I think.
Yeah, you would expect almost naturally in a game like that the pressure kind of starts to dial up towards the end. You know, if you're the defending team, you start to drop back, but that's just not really what we saw. I mean, Liz, I'll ask the same question to you. Did you see any kind of grounds for optimism in that latter period?
No. Next question. No, just to expand on that. I think that was it. You ended up with too many people who were either marked out the game or not linking up. And times when we have seen that kind of muddy ball chaos work, I think I was just having a wee think there, and there's a couple of factors. And one is having particularly Vaughan and Stanton on the pitch, the guys that have got the skills, to take the ball and juggle it and nutmeg defenders and make something happen out of nothing and create an opening. We didn't have them on. Also, Airdrie didn't do what Queen's Park did, what Partick did, which is take their best players off. We didn't have Megwa being taken off after 75 minutes and applauding the crowd as funny as it would have been. I think it was the most tactically astute performance I've seen against us from any team this season. And I think the fact that they'd figure it out completely, it was summed up when we got into injury time. We had the ball down around the 18-yard line. Connolly's in the middle and Scott Brown is on the wing trying to make something happen. And you're thinking, how has this happened? Like, you two should be in the other positions if you actually want to try and make a goal happening. And you had this weird thing where you had Scott Brown out on the right, Aidan Connolly in the middle looking for it, and nothing was going to come off there. I think that's when you realised the game was a bogey. As I say, I think that the muddy ball works against weaker teams or against cocky managers that make daft substitutions. It wasn't going to work against Rhys McCabe and Airdrie.
That's it. Certainly not yesterday. They were very, very just so clear on what their jobs were. They'd
done their homework. It looked like the first team that actually gone, okay, this is what Rovers have been doing all season. What do we need to do to counter it? What do we need to change in our game to counter it? And they came out prepped for us. And it's the first time I've seen a team do that this season, look like they've actually done the homework and done the prep.
That's it. Michael Stewart said it on the radio yesterday. The Rovers are cavalier. That's a good word to describe it, actually. And that's what Airdrie just didn't let us do that. We've said before, it's like Ian Murray just likes to be sort of swashbuckling. And there was no opportunity for that. They're just like, nah, we're just going to, and again, I don't mean this negatively, but we're going to sit in, we're going to do our jobs, we're going to shut off your angles, and then see what you can do. And I mean, it's turned out twice now, specifically at Airdrie, not an awful lot. Whereas the teams that come out and try to go toe-to-toe with us, the greatest example is Dunfermline. Because it's a derby and because they come flying out and they're crashing around all over the place, and we keep turning them over because that's where Ian Murray works. That's where he wants to be. Just a final point in the game itself. Scott, you mentioned about the injury time. So I thought he played 5, but I have to tell you, I couldn't find the energy to be worked up about it for exactly what we've just said. I was like, he could play 10, and it didn't feel like we were knocking on the door. Normally, I'm one of these saddos who's got like the stopwatch going, so I say when I'm like, I think he played 10, he did play 5, I know he did. But I'm like, I'm looking at it and I'm annoying everyone around me by being like, he's played 4.5, he's played 5 now. I wasn't bothered yesterday. It was like, it's not happening. It just didn't have that feel about it. So that brings us to the end of the game, and the players decided to make their way off the park, which is generally a sensible thing to do, to be fair. And Ross Millen got himself caught up in a bit of a, I was going to say scuffle. That's not the right word. Just a frank exchange of views with Mason Hancock. managed to pick up a red card out of it. Now, obviously, no knowledge of what's been said, of what's happened. I don't know. It's from my, kind of Rovers tinted spectacle position, seems a bit unnecessary. There was no violence. Nobody was throwing punches or anything. It's a bit of verbals. The game's already done. Surely you can just get him down the tunnel. But as you see, I wasn't there. The referee knows what he's heard. Somewhat frustrating, I think. Scott, we've been pretty vocal previously about Ross Millen's disciplinary record. Do you think he's let himself down a bit there?
I don't think he's actually just let himself down. I think he's let his teammates down, to be honest. I think the fact that Scott Brown kind of, as a captain, should almost led by example in terms of he was not bothered about what was going on behind him. Straight over at the fans, just saying, "Look, sorry," and just clapping us for coming and whatever. But like, it seemed to me it did all begin with, obviously we had a wee bit of banter with Hancock at one point when there was a delay in play, and so he was getting a little bit of stick for some of the Rovers fans because he was the nearest Airdrie player to us. But he did what most players would do in terms of they've won, and he kind of grins at the fans and kind of gives a wee gesture or whatever. I don't think there's anything worth getting worked up about, really. Um, I think Millen and Brown, to begin with, actually took offence to what he was doing because they both kind of went over to him saying, "Look, what are you doing?" sort of thing. But then obviously they two have kept walking over, and Brown's left them to it and come over. But it does seem like, and then the two benches kind of came together as if something was happening. But then you just kind of see a red card getting brandished in the air, and then Ross Millen's charging down the tunnel. But he's obviously, it is like we said, Leslie said it before we started recording. It was very Davo-esque. It was just something's went wrong, and they went right. There's a red card. Fair chance it's for Davo. This time you're going, who's it for? But then you're going, every chance Ross Millen or somebody's said something that he really shouldn't have. And I can guarantee you today, he's probably absolutely regretting what he's done. But I just hope it is only a one, maybe a two match, because he has been suspended for yellow cards as well. So I don't know if that will get taken into account. You've already been suspended. Anytime you get a red card, it's almost you get an extra game because you've been suspended. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it makes it worse the fact that Ewan Murray went off as well injured, because I highly doubt he's going to be fit for next week the way that he just went down. I might be wrong, but I just think that if that's the case, then absolutely let's pray that Dan O'Reilly signed a contract this week, because then we are really struggling for next week for a defence.
Yeah, I think the thing with Ross Millen, like it's a feature, not a bug. You get this baked in, and when we've talked him up for it on this podcast previously, but I had a look to see. So he's had 7 yellow cards and a red card so far this season. 2 of them are for fouls. Like 2 of them actually just during the normal course of a game of football while the ball was in play. He's got 3 for just squaring up to people. But again, that's part of what he gives you. I think all 3 of them were in games that we won. And then he got 1 for taking his top off at Hampden, and 1 for jumping into the terrace at Gayfield when we scored the last minute winner. And now he's got a straight red for getting involved in nonsense after the final whistle's gone. So yeah, as you see, that's part of what you get. It's a little bit like we said with Ian Murray. You get this kind of chaotic stuff. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Ross Millen, one of his key strengths is that kind of the passion and the snidiness that he gives you. Sometimes it boils over. Just quickly on that point then though, about the fact that we will not have Ross Millen, almost certainly won't have Ewan Murray, and potentially won't have Dan O'Reilly. Les, is there an easy solution at right back in particular for next week?
I was thinking a bit about this, and up in Inverness, we played a back four of Dick, O'Reilly, Corr, and Scott Brown, if I remember rightly. If somebody jump in and correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it was Josh Mullen and then that played right back.
That's right.
You're right.
That's right. That's right. Well remembered. Yeah, it was. It was Josh Mullen. I wouldn't necessarily encourage us to be playing Josh Mullen at right back again, but if we extend O'Reilly, and I hope we do, it's not necessarily a disaster because we have played a pretty similar back four to pretty decent effect against a pretty decent championship side before. So there is that solution. The other option is moving Brown back to right back or to centre back and doing some shifting about, which then gives a natural opening for Ross Matthews to come back in if he's fit. So it's not a disaster, but we could really do without that. It was exceedingly daft. And yeah, it creates problems elsewhere. One thing I was going to say, I'm glad I fact checked myself before I came on this one, because I was going to go on a big rant about mentality and could you imagine Dundee United or Partick Thistle getting a player sent off? Then I remembered Craig Sibbald got sent off yesterday. Then I also remembered Brian Graham was suspended for ramming with the Morton fans. So it's not just something that affects us as the Rovers.
Yeah, as an aside, I don't know if anybody heard Jim Goodwin on the radio yesterday. Absolutely grating his beads out about referees and about Big Bad Morton. Like, that's. I think sometimes it's overplayed slightly with Morton, but also like it's no longer a surprise. You can't complain about the fact that like your defenders are being bullied by Morton. That's Morton. That's what they're there for. And complaining about referees in Scottish football is almost as bad. Carol, just give me your thoughts then on kind of sort of right back in the defence for the foreseeable future, I suppose.
I'm going to echo what Liz. I think Scott Brown is the saviour of all. I think is him dropping back. I thought he did really well yesterday, actually, just to pick up. I thought he was on the ball a lot and put in a good shift yesterday. So I think Scott Brown dropping back, and we've got Corr and hopefully O'Reilly. And I think if Ross Matthews had just a little bit more game time in his legs, I would feel a little less stressed and cautious about it. But yeah, we've got Ross Matthews coming back in. I just wish he had a few more games in his legs.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's probably, as things stand at the moment, that's probably what I would do. I would be inclined to play Scott. I'm always, by default, I always prefer moving a more attacking option into fullback. I think you can really limit yourself. But I think Scott Brown probably gives you best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And as you say, Ross Matthews comes back into the midfield, so you're not really losing out there. But there's also every chance Scott McGill could reappear there as well. So while we're talking about the defence, then let's move into our big question for today. Which, to be fair, I'm being very lazy and I'm just stealing a question that Leanne Crichton asked me yesterday when I was very briefly on Sports Sound after the game. So Rovers have now played 20 league games and they've kept 4 clean sheets. In all competitions, it's 29 games and 7 clean sheets. So the question just quite simply then is, going into the second half of the season, given we're in this title race, does the defence concern you? And Scott, I'll start with you, please.
Going by, especially the games that I've been at since I've been back home over Christmas time and stuff, it has been worrying, especially them 2 home games recently, how easy it's been for teams to score it. Well, Ayr found it very easy to score, and I think it was 9 in the last 3 home games. So that's actually just not acceptable. 9 goals in 3 games at home. I mean, I know that we've still not lost, which is the positive you take out of it. But it just shows you that it's lucky that we've got guys this season that can score goals and pull us out it, because last season, if you're conceding 4 at home, there's no way in hell that we were getting in and out of that game. Like, it wasn't happening. So it's worrying me, just the fact that the same goal recently has been happening all the time. I know that yesterday it didn't happen like that, but the amount of times in the last 3 weeks that we've conceded for a guy just running for the midfield, being almost untouched, and then he's just shooting for before he gets to the box and it goes in. Although, right, we'll take away that nonsense goal that happened for the fourth goal for Ayr, but yes, well, the Pars game, and then obviously pretty much all the Ayers goals came from outside the box, and they were all goals that you're going, right, where's that player? Where's that player? They weren't even to be seen. So it's a wee bit worrying, but at the same time, it's almost actually happened all. And I hate pinning it on one player. It's all happened since Stanton's went in, being injured. And I think it almost shows you how good and he's probably our best player that Sam Stanton's been this season. The fact that we're continuing to leak goals whilst he's not been in the team. And I know we didn't start great against Ayr and he played that game and actually scored a great goal to get us back in that game. But you've seen it Tannadice, he was everywhere. You've seen it Gayfield, he was everywhere. And these games, we kept the clean sheet at Tannadice actually, which a little bit surprised me that day. But it just shows that you've got a guy that's doing two guys' jobs, and it seems to be that we struggle to find that replacement. And I think that's also what I was saying yesterday about the whole Airdrie having a spare man. I think you don't get that if Stanton's playing. I think it's just we don't have anybody like him. So whether we look to try and get somebody like him, because from what we've heard, it's very vague, but it sounds like it's going to be at least 6 to 8 weeks, just going by the kind of injury he's got, and he's still, I think, in a knee brace. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to replace him, but that's the sort of guy I think we need to try and get, because that's the hole that we seem to be allowing anything coming through us right now.
Yeah, it's so when I was asked the question yesterday, more or less what I said was like, I'm not really worried about the defence because up till this point, like we've been scoring enough at the other end that it hasn't really mattered. You know, we are top of the league. For all that we've maybe not kept as many clean sheets as we like, we've only failed to score in 2 games. It happens to be they've both been at Airdrie and we've lost them both 1-0. But we've scored in literally every other game that we've played this season, including at Easter Road. So the other the other end of the park, they've been doing the work to kind of make up for any sort of defensive deficiencies. But I think you're right in as much as the issues with the defence don't seem to be with the defenders as much as we're unbalanced in other areas and it's opening up gaps. But Carol, just again, same question to you. Does that defensive record give you any cause for concern?
Not really. I'm on record of being a big advocate, as I think one of the biggest changes to Scottish football is to remove a point for a 0-0 draw. Goals are entertaining. So removing the top of the league, and the thing is, as a fan, you want goals. And there's nothing more depressing, I think, than listening to someone going on, oh, we constantly need a clean sheet. Do you know what? I want goals in the game. I want to be entertained. And I think, Duncan, exactly what you said, up until this point, we were scoring one more up the other end. We were scoring up the other end. And that, I'm not concerned about the defence, because the problem isn't really in the defence. It's that Sam Stanton-sized hole further up and around the field. And I'm not concerned, because ultimately I think fans want goals.
This is it. We've said before, the value for money, the entertainment factor you're getting out of this Rovers side. I mean, I stick by it. It must be a case that if you were a neutral, but you had to just watch the games of any one side, Rovers have got to be the side to watch this season. But Leslie, if you could just round us off, please, with your thoughts on the defence and whether it's concerning.
Absolutely. I've got a slightly different angle on this, which I'll go through. And I also have a John Greer story about the time I played at New Broomfield, which we'll come on to after if there's time. But what I'll just talk about first. So I was having a think, and I think, like everybody else has said, I don't mind us conceding goals in and of itself. That's not really a concern to me. You can then, I think, end up with that becoming an end in and of itself, trying to keep clean sheets. What does worry me a bit though, so we've played 20 league games. In 15 of those games, we've scored first. In 8 of the games where we've scored first, we've then gone on to chuck the lead away. Now, the difference I think this season compared to last season and the season before, we've got the quality to then bounce back, as we all know. However, we're still more likely to lose the lead than hold on to it, which does suggest to me that we still haven't quite got this game management thing figured out. And it does kind of lead into my sort of overarching reflection on yesterday's game. So, in isolation, I wouldn't be that bothered if we'd lost a game 1-0. It happens. It happens to the best teams in the world. Bayern Munich lose games, Manchester City lose games. You know, it happens. However, it does come not long after we've chucked away daft points at home against Ayr and against Arbroath. And I just think if we'd been a bit smarter in those games and made game management decisions, actually, if we'd done half of what Airdrie had done yesterday in the Ayr and Arbroath games, I'd be a lot less concerned about losing a game in isolation. I think it is important to remember there will be blips. It's one game lost in isolation, but it's what that comes on the back of, and it's having that game management so that when we do lose goals, they're not potentially costing us points. So that's the bigger concern that I have, rather than losing a single game in isolation or only keeping a small number of clean sheets.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point, definitely. And yeah, sorry, please give us your. I nearly forgot it again. Give us your Airdrie story, please.
Aye, so I mean, this is not John Greer level, but so when I was a student, this was a long time ago now. I did German as my outside subject, and our language tutor, Siegfried Opelka, was an Austrian guy who, as well as being a German language teacher at Edinburgh Uni, unbeknown to us, was also a budding football coach. And he's got his UEFA Pro license, and he quit academia and became a UEFA licensed coach, as you do. So he'd had this idea that we could have a bounce match football against Glasgow University's students of German. And this had started out as an idea, we'll gather in the meadows in Edinburgh and we'll have a few beers and it'll just be a bit of fun. This thing then grew arms and legs, and we started practicing on the meadows, and we then got told one day, actually, the game is not going to be on the meadows, the game is going to be in New Broomfield. So we were told we're going to be at New Broomfield, and we were then told as well, Bertie Votes is coming along. So Bertie Votes at this time was the Scotland manager, and so we had strips made up and everything with numbers and things like this, and so we had Edinburgh University German students against Glasgow University students of German. We managed to just get a few German speakers who were good at football as well, which helped a bit. And we arrived at the stadium before, so we were actually in the away dressing room. We were in the dressing room that the Rovers would have been in yesterday. We came out, and I play at left back. I wasn't very good, but I did get forward, put a lovely shot in it, and just missed scoring at the what's called, I think, the Mate Poplatnik end. So finished the game. We won 6-3. That was the first. Every year since then, there's been a match, not held at New Broomfield, but at different places between different institutes and students. We won the first one, and then Bertie Votes gave a really boring speech in the boardroom. I mean, it was in German. And I think it was well known at the time Bertie Votes' English wasn't great, and he gave this speech in German that was incredibly dull. But he met us all and he signed things for us. So that was the story of how I played at New Broomfield in front of Bertie Votes.
And did anybody get selected for that team?
I was going to say, yeah, if that shot snuck in, you might have found yourself called up.
I did have my Rovers top on underneath my red team T-shirt, so I snuck my Rovers top on.
Fantastic, brilliant. Well, I think to tell you that's a much more upbeat way for us to end this podcast rather than the majority of the content in there. But thank you to everyone who has listened or watched up till this point, and for sticking with this rather morose episode of the Oh No 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 podcast. As always, if you do want to get in touch, you can follow the Twitter, you can follow the Instagram, you can leave comments on the YouTube as well. If you haven't done already, please like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And we will be back later in the week, I would guess probably Thursday evening, to look forward to the visit of the rejuvenated Queen's Park. So be interesting to see how that one goes, and indeed how 5 or 6 of us are going to try and put together different configurations of a back four. So again, I say thank you for listening, and we will see you again next time.